Welcome back to Bootstrap 3 Essential Training, Understanding the Grid System. This is part 4. What I want to talk about in this tutorial is let's talk about how we can actually nest columns inside of other columns in Bootstrap 4 and the advantages that gives us as we're designing our web pages. Alright, so picking up where we left off, I'm looking at grid_3, the one we used in our last exercise. I'm going to go ahead and do save as. Let's save this as grid_4. And again, I want you to have availability to have these exercise files, and I don't want to overwrite some of the files that we're using. I'm going to go and load _4 inside my browser window. And then I want to go in and let's go ahead and delete all the setup that we've done inside this initial tutorial. Because I want to, when I work through this nesting exercise, I want to work through this from scratch with you so I know that you understand exactly what we're doing. I don't want to copy and paste. I want to explain this as I go because this can get a little bit complex, but it's actually a very cool feature of Bootstrap. Let's go ahead and save those changes. We've just taken all that stuff out. Refresh our browser. We should have nothing there because we've got nothing left in the body. I'm going to go ahead and leave these colors in because we may want to use them. In my first row, so I'm up at the very top now, under my body element where I've set up my first row. What I want to do is let's set up a grid system. Inside that row, I want to put in a div. And I want to give this div a class, and I want the class to be col md9. And remember, we've got 12 columns that we can work with across this row. Inside that 9-column grid, let's go ahead and put in some text in here. I'm just going to call this, let's call it level 1. So this is the level 1 section of that grid. And inside my level 1 section, I want to put in another div, and I want to give this a class of row. Because remember, whenever we go to set up any columns inside of Bootstrap, we've got to have a row. So that's going to be the end of the row. Keep in mind that this row, in fact, I'm going to put a note here. This is our closing div for my 9-column. 9-column closing div. And I can confirm that by just highlighting it. It should actually highlight the opening div for that. And now you're beginning to see why you like to use those notes. And inside the new row that we created, let's go ahead and set up another div. And this div I want to give a class. Let's give it a class, and let's make this class column extra small 6, and let's give it a class of column small 6. So what I've done is I've actually set up another div inside my div that sets up another group or another set of columns inside that row. Now let's go ahead and give these classes for color so we can actually see what we're doing here. Let's give this first one color 1. Remember, we actually have that set up from the original exercise. And I'm going to give this one a color 2 class. So when we save these changes, I'm going to put in here, let's just put some text inside this other one. We'll call this one level 2. So you can actually see what's going on inside this div. Let's go ahead and save this change. And let's go refresh our browser window. And you'll notice that in my level 1 div, which I set up as 9-column across the top, let's go ahead and give this thing an expanded display. You'll notice I actually have a level 2 that's inside of that. I can actually take another one of these. Let's go ahead and copy this. And let's paste it right under that row. Let's give this one color 3. Save that change. And now you'll notice I've got my main column, which is my 9-column, my 9 medium columns that go across on the medium device. And in fact, what I could do, let's actually make this, because we have 9-column medium, let's do col extra small 12. So on small devices and extra small devices, it's going to be 12 columns. On medium devices, it's going to be 9 columns. And inside there, I've got 2 more columns set up of 6 apiece. So let's go ahead and save that. Refresh. So now you notice that when we get into the large, we've got the 9 columns. And as I shrink this, now you'll notice it's taken up the entire 12 columns. And I've got my 2 internal columns that are taking up 6 columns apiece inside that 9 columns. So what I've done is I've taken that 9 column div right here, and inside there I have 12 additional columns inside that column. I hope that's not making it too confusing. And actually, to make it a little clearer, what I could do is I could come outside of this, where we set up our initial div right here, where I've got that 9 column div. Let's go ahead and put in another div so it makes it a little clearer what we're doing. And on this one, I'm just going to say, now keep in mind when we're extra small, we're 12. So on my MD, I'm going to say col MD 3. Remember, because I want it to equal 12. So now we've got that 12 in there. And again, I'm just going to put in level 1 in here. And keep in mind, this level 1 is only going to show on medium-sized devices and above for that 3 columns. And we'll give this one a color of, let's give it color 3 so it's not the same. Save all. So now let's refresh. Now you'll notice, okay, we've got our level 1. We actually have a level 1 that's there. When this guy drops down, because of the way we've set this up, we're not seeing our internals. And that's because I don't have an internal class here. We can actually set that up in a minute. But I just wanted you to see we're actually taking up that other 3. So I wanted you to see how that works out. So let's go ahead and refresh that. So keep in mind that we've got our 2 6 columns inside our 9 column. And if that 9 column goes to small or extra small, it then becomes a 12 column display, which is what we're seeing right there. And that's how we can actually nest a grid inside of another grid. We've actually nested a 12 column grid inside of a 9 column grid. And we actually, there are times when we actually use that inside of our websites. And normally what we do, since we're using color 2 and 3 here for our 2 internals, what we would normally do by doing that, we'd actually set up a little bit of padding. So we can just say padding top and bottom, we'll say 0, and right to left is 5 pixels. And that just gives us a little bit of spacing between those 2, because right now it looks like they're right on top of one another, which actually they are. We can save that, we can refresh, and then you can see we actually get a little bit of padding off the letters themselves. So we actually overrode the padding. And if we wanted margin, we could do the same thing. If we actually wanted to move it inside the inside that original grid, say margin, top and bottom 0, 5 pixels left and right, and that would actually give us a little bit of margin, so it pushes it away from the border of the containing grid or the containing column. Save that, let's refresh, and now you can see, well, because we've actually exceeded the size, remember, because we only have that fixed width, we've actually exceeded the size now of the column itself, and that's why we've lost that side by side, because remember, we've got that 15 pixels of padding that's built in. We talked about that when we looked at the chart, and that's why you saw that break, because we added margin to it, and obviously it cannot handle that margin based on the constraints of the size of the Bootstrap configuration in the Bootstrap default CSS. So I hope that explains how you nest columns inside of columns and the importance of using the columns inside of Bootstrap. I mean, because it's a very, very powerful feature in Bootstrap. What I want to do now is in the next tutorial, I'm actually going to show you a sketch of a layout. And then my challenge to you is going to be to actually create that layout using the Bootstrap Grid system. And then right after I show you that, I'll have a workthrough of the solution that I used to solve that layout situation.